Hello, welcome to Teen Talk. I am your host today. My name is Emerson. I am here with our panelists.
My name is Mason Griggs. Happy to be here.
My name is Cassius, and I'm also happy to be here.
Welcome to Teen Talk.
We're going to talk about eating disorders today. And we have a couple questions to guide. What do we mean by eating disorders? Everyone eats, but when does it become a problem?
So eating disorders are really just, it's a whole spectrum, but it's anything from a condition as RFED, a condition as bulimia. They're the major ones that are diagnosed, but bulimia, binge eating, anorexia, RFED are the main four that we're going to be covering because they're the ones that have been done the most studies on. But anything from eating too much to bulging yourself, but past the point of moderation into like the area of harm that causes to your physical body.
Yeah, eating disorders is like a broad spectrum. It's one of the largest mental health epidemics in the United States. More than 30 million Americans struggle with eating disorders. And we're here to kind of just discuss the problems with them, and root causes, stuff like that.
Regarding mainly just the youth area, we have most expertise there.
Yeah. And from eating disorders are generally, they're a psychological disorder. So there are some genetic components, but the real big thing is stress and like low self-esteem that generally triggers it to fully develop.
Yeah, it's psychological. A lot of them are brought on by stress, depression, anxiety, anything just remotely troubling to your mind can often catapult you into the area where you're at most harm for them. You can fall susceptible to them. So conditions from society, beliefs about yourself, that you're not good enough, like low self-esteem, as Emerson said, catapult you into just falling for an eating disorder and getting one. And a lot of times you won't even know you have it because it's not talked about enough, which is why we're here to raise awareness. Yeah,
eating disorders are often stemmed from societal images that propagate these like ideal body images or just the need to feel, there's also the need to feel different. It's hard to broadly categorize what an eating disorder is because it's such a broad topic. There's hundreds, some even say thousands of them. I mean,
but just to quickly overview, it's like anorexia is when you're like restricting your eating. You're not eating enough or at all.
It's categorized as low body weight or fat because you're not eating enough, you're not getting the nutrients you need. It's often malnourished, categorized by that and by images of yourself as being too much, so you're restricting yourself to be little.
Yeah, and it's often or stuff like BMI.
Mm-hmm.
Like it gives you a totally inaccurate view of
Yeah.
like what your health is.
Would you just explain what the BMI scale is for people?
Okay, so
listening?
BMI is basically a metric that's just how old are you, what's your height, and what's your weight, and it basically just uses only that to tell you
Mhm.
like how overweight you are.
The-
So it's like a bodybuilder would be considered very overweight,
Yeah,
even though it's
the
mostly
reason
muscle.
it's inaccurate is because, for one, it wasn't built with all bodies in mind. It's very, very restrictive on who it limits and who it accesses. So, like anything that like muscle mass isn't calculated, a lot of things aren't calculated. First off, like you have, if that's just how you were, they're still going how you were born or how you just are. It only is fit to like the ideal standard of people. And to back to the topic of anorexia, more things to know. It's the second leading cause for minors of death when it comes to mental illnesses.
Yeah. And I think it was the leading cause of death before school shootings became such a thing.
Yeah. Cassius.
One person dies from anorexia every 52 minutes. That's
Uh,
about 10 to 11,000 people per year.
Yeah.
10,280.
Yeah. And then there's bulimia, which is you're eating basically the right amount or you're overeating, but then after that you're purging it in some way, which is generally vomiting
Mm-hmm.
or like really excessively working out afterwards. And then there's binge eating, which is just eating way too much in a single sitting. And I'm not talking like three helpings or something.
Oftentimes, it's not even for nutrition. It's for
Yeah.
to increase your body size because you feel you're not enough. As we talked about, stems from many beliefs about yourself. So if you're not enough, it's typically binge eating is where you can increase. And then like with bulimia, it's working out. It's also just excess laxatives to try to flush it all out. For people who are too scared or like too things to do something through their throat. There's multiple ways to be done, and a lot of it's just not recognized.
When I picture like a spectrum of eating disorders, I have sort of two opposite ends. Like one of them would be anorexia, where people are under eating and they need to consume more, and then on the complete opposite end, you have like binge eating, which is like where people eat too much and it becomes unhealthy for them.
Yeah, and I think actually that leads really well because right in the middle would probably be ARFID, right? Where it's stands for, I'm going to forget.
Avoidant restrictive food
Avoidant
intake
restrictive.
disorder.
Yes, thank you. Where it's past the point of just picky eating, quote unquote, which is not recognized in younger children. But once you hit the age of 10, if you have an excess fear of specific foods or eating certain things because of how old behaviors of like green meant poison or darker colors should be avoided, it's still kept there and you're still scared of these things that you shouldn't eat. And so you are picky by your nature rather than choice.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to move on to the next topic. How does this show up personally in your school, relationships and social circles or youth sports?
For personally, the way I see it and a lot of my friends is a lot of it's kind of an average that people, especially men, are just kind of either short or thin when they're in their teens, and it's always the expectation of, well, you've got to get bigger, you've got to be better, you're in your teens, so you're ramping up to be this big adult. Why aren't you there yet? And so I see within friends a lot of like concerns and societal pressures that they have to start getting stronger, that they have to be going to a gym to like get rid of weight, which can cause eating disorders because the stress is there. Or a lot of people will develop the eating disorders among my friends and among myself of like, I need to start dieting myself to only have a specific amount, and I need to get rid of this weight and gain like muscle mass. For athletics specifically, Cash, would you like to talk about that?
Yeah, I will. So I'm a wrestler, and wrestling, along with a bunch of other combat sports, are some of the only athletic sports where you actually need to cut weight and be at a specific weight in order to compete in them. I also do jujitsu on top of that, and I had to cut 25 pounds in 5 days, so losing an average of 5 pounds a day. And I paid $145 just to be able to compete. Had I not made weight, I would have spent that money and then not even got to compete. For wrestling, it's a little bit different because you could reclass your weight. However, just the general problem of weight cutting at an age like mine is it stunts your growth substantially. A lot of people who start wrestling when they're really, really young don't get very tall. They stay really short because it's a constant up and down of like how much you weigh. So like when I'm not cutting during summer, I'm like 165, 170 pounds. And then when I'm in season and I'm competing, I'm 145, 140 pounds, losing anywhere from like 20 to 30 pounds.
Yeah. And Emerson, would you share your personal experience before you do? I just, to add on Cassius, yeah, the stunt growth thing is a very real problem. There's not enough studies to really say, but the studies that have been done by the NIH show that anorexia starts inducing growth hormone blockers, and there are other things like bulimia that also do that, where you just will stop growing because there are hormone blockers now within you.
Yeah. Okay. So I'd say my personal experience is like mostly the women in my life or people raised as women. It tends to be a very real thing where there's kind of this policing around like how much you can eat or like what you're allowed to eat, and very much a feeling of like or just especially with when it comes to like puberty, it's like girls start growing earlier. So it's like you really get this feeling of like you need to stay as small as you can for as long as you can. And it really leads to this just way of thinking where it's like any lost weight is good lost weight. So it's like...
Yeah, it's a very real line of thinking. It's susceptible for everyone, really. Because we talked about before, and there's multiple people who are raised aware. This is probably, I think, one of the most middle grounds for awareness, but the bigger bodies are the ones who are usually most susceptible and are most likely at risk for these because of the pressures from society. But personal friends, personal family members who often are susceptible and feel that they have to shrink down are like just the ones that have it most hardest.
Yeah. And in the past, okay, new topic. In the past, we may have had magazines as a beauty standard. What sets the standard for youth now?
I think definitely social media. Social media.
Yeah, definitely for sure.
I think
Maybe.
it's very well recognized that it's becoming kind of an issue in terms of body dysmorphia and
yeah.
just in general eating disorders and how you view yourself is often based off of how you want to look, which is often based off of how people feel approved.
Yeah, it's because if you have like a role model, a lot of times, I've seen this, and I've actually been extremely fallen for this many times. But if I have the role model, I'm going to really, like subtly or subconsciously is the word, subconsciously kind of like take on the rest of that, or like, oh, I want to be like this, and so that means I have to do like this, despite like the message that they're sending. There's always the like an accidental message of like body as well. Because, like, for instance, there's like fitness influencers who often will give like messages that are not fitness related, but you still want to be like that. And so, for the content space where everybody is different, there's definitely a trend of the similarities between body size, and you always want to be that because there is a middle standard held. Middle standard held by America of like, well, here's the acceptable range, and many people when they're growing into that are beyond the acceptable range because you're not the adult yet, but you still feel the urge to be there, and it's a very problem that people fall for pretty easily.
Yeah, I definitely feel like social media, it's really like you need to either be, for girls at least, you need to either be thin or curvy in the right way. And it really like body, like the good body to have changes every like year now. So it's like there's probably tons of people who are like really trying to keep up with that. And it's like, I see all these fitness influencers that go through these like dramatic transformations. And it's like so obvious if like you're aware of how nutrition and exercising works, that it's like they're not doing that through the means that most people have. And they're just setting this unattainable standard for the average person. And it's really like that, plus like plastic surgeries that no one tells anyone about. It's like
I have were you about to say something, or did I cut you off?
Well, yeah, I was gonna actually add on about the plastic surgery and just getting life altering or not life altering, physically altering surgeries that could affect your life, and like just to fit a specific societal standard that, like Emerson was saying, might die down in the next few years, where it's like it's not even deemed attractive anymore.
Yeah, and it's like it's always been a strange. I think plastic surgery, especially in recent years, has become just this weirdly normal thing for just a person to do.
Yeah. And I think the people who definitely influence that, right, were the high end of the like model, so to speak, like people who have been like, there's the joke about like the Kardashians never look the same each year because it's always a new surgery, right? And as funny as that can be, that still is inherently one of the problems of like, well, you're joking about this and because it's normalized.
Yeah.
And that's why it's joked about. We mentioned this a while ago, but like, Emerson, you want to talk about the pregnancy and how you're expected to like either get like a surgery when you're done?
Yeah, or it's not really quite. It's just after pregnancy, it's like you typically have gained like 50 pounds in like just fat around your uterus, basically, and it's just you're really expected to be able to bounce back from that like unattainably fast, and it's not like. Like unless you didn't grow at all, it's like the skin there is going to be different.
And that's one of the other societal standards because you're expected to do this, and so surgery seems like an option, and it really shouldn't be. People should just be comfortable with how you are. But that's the problem here is that there's just too much stress, too much societal pressures that induce these mental illnesses such as eating disorders, and that's why people. After pregnancy rates, one of the statistics from the NIH is that a lot of them will often go into bulimia to get weight loss, and that creates for a very negative experience for the woman, and then also the child that they're raising after this. They're going to be pressured from this.
Yeah, and I'd say that like when it comes to fitness influencers, a lot of female fitness influencers are working out too much and they've lost their menstrual cycle, which is a huge red flag when it comes to if you're getting enough calories or if you're working out at a healthy rate. And it's, yeah.
Kesh, would you talk about that of the fitness area of how people just don't really recognize that as weight loss or as not weight loss, but as an eating disorder?
So specifically in the fitness area, there's a lot of people that take supplements to try to alter how they look. It's kind of a different form of a eating disorder, with which I would say it's more body dysmorphia, of them not wanting to look like how they currently look. So a big one that's popping up is creatine. A lot of people take creatine to and then go to the gym and work out, and it'll like more temporarily kind of like make them look more defined or their physique more built. But there's a lot in the fitness area that kind of stem from eating disorders.
That's also the like, well, actually the personal experience here. I was at lunch the other day. Someone comes in with a giant 20-ounce can of Monster and pulls out a bucket of creatine. Like how much? What, you know how many ounces that is? Just the like. Like mini pizza size box of creatine, dumps 3 full scoops in that Monster and starts downing it because they're planning to go to the gym later. And the pressure from that there's pressure from that because a lot of people don't realize that working out is one of the ways that you're doing this weight loss. It's unhealthy to do too much of it, and people don't recognize that because weight or strength gaining and endurance gaining and all of this like exercise is seen as a good thing in society.
Yeah, there's a certain amount of exercise that you need. That's a healthy amount. If you go anything over that, it starts becoming more unhealthy, and it'll deteriorate your body. It'll be more dangerous than it is helpful. And a lot of people cross that barrier and just live in the gym. They're called like gym rats. They like live in the gym and they just like work out, spend all their time working out every single day. That's like all their free time.
Yeah. We're gonna move on to our personal experiences.
I was going to ask you, what do you have for that?
Yeah, I have a couple of friends who have had pretty bizarre things happen. I have a friend.
Bizarre adventure.
I have a friend who, in her, I think it was homecoming or prom pictures with someone. One of her friends' moms had edited the picture so that her daughter looked like super skinny, and everyone else looked like like overweight, kind of. And it was like, like it wasn't even something that they had been asked about, even. It was just something that the mom had decided to Photoshop in a just effort to make her daughter look better by looking skinnier.
Let's touch on that real quickly, because we talked about how social media was like one of the biggest influences here. Well, with the availability of so many free photo editing and so many free like filters and things, it's weirdly acceptable to just edit yourself for that, because social media is often just edited, it's filtered. So when you're getting role models or influences from social media, well, now you kind of want to edit yourself, and that pressure also leads to doing that in real life, which makes you more susceptible to these eating disorders.
Yeah, and I think it was also kind of her mom pushing it onto her, because I have tons of friends who like their mom made them go on a diet when they were like 12 even. And there's tons of parents, I think, that force their kids to follow diets just because it's like, we're doing this as a family kind of thing. And it's just like, as a growing teenagers, it's like, we need very diverse nutrition.
Absolutely. Cassius?
Yeah, I agree with the sentiment that it's very harmful to like alter photos and stuff, because it leaves an unrealistic idea in your mind that this is the ideal body, this is the dream body that you want. And that just kind of continues on the societal standard of what an ideal body image is. And it pushes other people to want to look unhealthily skinny or unhealthily big. And it alters your entire perspective on how you eat and consume.
And I think we kind of have, like, as a culture, kind of have just not a good idea of what healthily skinny looks like.
Yeah.
Because it's like, you're supposed to have, no matter how skinny you are supposed to have at least a little bit of fat.
Of course. I don't want to be wrong in my numbers. Is it 5 to 7%?
It's something like that. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, why is it more of a problem today as compared to like 2000s, 2010s?
I think it's really what's happening right now is really like a rehashing of the 2000s, because I wasn't really alive during the 2000s, but from what I've seen in like old movies and stuff, and like when people talk about it, it was like really this thing where like anyone who wasn't like rail thin was fat, and it was just this kind of like totally just unhealthy way of thinking about like fat and stuff. And it's just like nowadays it's like it used to be kind of like in the 2010s, it was like started to lean more towards like body positivity and like it's good to love your curves or whatever.
Big movement for that.
But now it's like that's kind of regressed a bit to where it's like you need to very much look a certain way, and that either has to be very skinny or perfectly curvy.
I wouldn't say it's more of a problem now. I would just say that it's more known about now. But it has become more prevalent since the pandemic. According to a study by the NIH, 50%. There's been a 50% increase in the amount of women who struggle with eating disorders, and a large portion of them go undiagnosed and just they don't even know that they have an eating disorder, but it's still affecting their daily life.
Yeah. Because like from the 2000s, right? Like let's take the Spider-Man movies, for example, right? Everybody in there is, I'm talking about the Amazing Spider-Man specifically. Everybody in there is rail thin. Like, why? There's really no need. But even then, it was not a trend, a tradition kind of like, this has to be. This is the ideal actor position. This is the ideal look for a character.
Yeah, or I think that honestly happened like, or I don't really know, but I think honestly seeing that kind of skinniness as being like the ideal health is kind of a pretty modern thing. Because like it used to be, it's like if you have fat, that means that you have food to eat.
Yeah, you're eating well. You're rich for being fat.
Yeah, and it's we're going to move on to the next topic, which is how eating disorders affect marginalized communities like people of color and the queer community.
All right. To start with that personal experience, right? As quote unquote kind of like a slightly skinny, effeminate male within the queer community, there's plenty of labels like twink, otter, just kind of gay or queer. Really, there's a difference in each one, but among twinks especially, there's always the specific stereotype: you're hairless, you're skinny, you're kind of short. A lot of things that just kind of are a little demeaning, especially within the community, unless you take on that role. But because of that, because of the kind of harm that it does, there's a lot of pressure of, well, now I need to like conform to this, or I need to get out of this, in which I will no longer be accepted. So there's a lot of a bit of toxicness within stereotypes of the queer community, especially, that each of them take on. But for personal experiences, I found it a lot. I found myself quite susceptible to an eating disorder after being pushed on a role of like twink, of now I need to like get rid of all of this fat and I need to gain a bunch of muscle to like go and be normal and not stereotyped. Do any of you have experiences such as that?
Well, Mason, you were talking about how women of color were less likely to be diagnosed with eating disorders than white women.
Yeah, there was the study where physically identical in every way except for like
Race.
Yeah.
So patients from, it was the ANAD who did this, but they put two therapists, which is an odd way to go about that. Two therapists in a room. They gave each of them the same thing, but the only difference was race, the descriptions that they gave. And they did not identify any eating disorder within black women because there's a stereotype and they think of them differently. There's an innate bias there.
Yeah. And therapists aren't, it's not mandatory training, at least in the state of Oklahoma, to cover eating disorders. So it's something that like a therapist who did not take a course to specialize in that will not be that aware of.
It's if you choose to learn this, if you choose to care enough about it, and there are plenty of people who care, but it should be a mandated thing so that everybody can be helped. Because often it'll go to like a psychiatrist or a physician for that specific thing, but a therapist is kind of more easy access these days, which is, we've come a long way, and that's great. But they should, because they're easy access, they should be mandated to learn this so that they can be the person to help you.
Yeah.
For more studies that have been done, do you want to speak, or do you want?
Or we're actually going to move on to the next topic. What can others do to help? Schools, churches, other people in places in the community? How do you talk to someone about an eating disorder?
I think institutions need to kind of destroy the societal standard body type that's been pushed for decades, and just go into acceptance of what a more natural body is like. And then on top of that, I feel like there needs to be education in the schools, education in the churches, and in community organizations. Like,
or there really needs to be more talk about like phys ed. It's like they will have you do like the sports and stuff, but they won't ever tell you about like, here's the benefits of exercising, and here's like nutritional, like here's like why it's so important to eat a good amount. And it's just, you're never talked about how it's like, hey, this is disordered eating.
You don't really get to that until 9th grade health science. But like if we were teaching this in middle school, beyond like rolling carts and phys ed or anything like that, to be able to be taught, hey, here's what you need for your nutrients, and here's what like a true body or true diet looks like.
Or you weren't.
Sorry, a true diet looks like. This is the healthy standard, so stop comparing yourself. A lot of people aren't realizing that because they aren't taught that. And so it's overall education, and I would also go so far as to say acceptance of it, because just because the knowledge is there does not mean that somebody is helping you accept it, which is a very independent thing and hard to control. But overall knowledge would go a far way to accepting this, and put in places such as Teen Talk, such as the church that we're at, All Souls, such as schools, such as TPS, who go to implement these courses would be very well, because children are more susceptible and should be learning this at a much younger age.
Yeah, and stuff like making school lunches free would definitely help with like making sure that people are at least have access to food, because it's not every. It could be considered disordered eating if you're only eating one meal, but it might be that you don't have enough money for anything but one meal.
Yeah, because we talked about this before, but another pressure that causes eating disorders is just not having enough. Like, let's say you're at home, and there's only a little bit of food in that fridge, right? Well, you don't want to be a pressure to your family, so you might go and just not eat. And that by itself is, you're limiting yourself. You're starting to get into that habit to develop an eating disorder. So there's just a lot of pressure from that, and schools going out to do free lunches like TPS is starting to do, and schools in California are starting to do, and it's becoming a broader thing, and we're moving towards that. But that does not stop the presence of the eating disorders that are still happening. And so it's just a lot of pressure from everywhere.
Yeah, and I think when it comes to talking to like someone you know with an eating disorder, it's like you don't talk about eating or food with them. Like talk about like what's going on in their life. Cuz it's like it's often that like the stresses of modern life are really what is triggering them the most.
Yeah. Cassius?
That's really tied in with what you were talking about with the stress. That's really tied in with binge eating to an
Yeah.
extent, because I feel like the main cause of binge eating is from stress related things. So if there's something going on, whether that be financial instability, just kind of eating is like a way of getting away from whatever stress is being caused in their life. So that really ties into binge eating, I feel like.
And on top of that, I think something else to add for education purposes. Do you guys know what food therapy is?
No.
So food therapy, especially, is a great thing when it comes to like things like ARFID, which is becoming more prevalent and more explored. But Oklahoma has a big food therapy area, in which they are helping you get over irrational fears of foods, basically becoming unpicky. So it's better for children young, but also through teens who do have ARFID. It helps them explore their foods and not be afraid of them to like actually eat them, so that they don't develop eating disorders. And I think that is definitely an area that should be continued to be explored. Children should be taught that, because you know about physical therapy. It's kind of physical therapy a little bit, like little bits of practices that are taught in like the physical education in middle school. Food therapy should be taught in health science, I believe, which would also help. People need to know more about it, because it helps with, it's a really big help with things like bulimia and anorexia, to be like, hey, here's what you need to know, so that you know what your nutrients you should be and what you can eat, to not be afraid and to explore yourself.
I also think that there should be mandated courses in the school, kind of like what they have for financial ed, where it's just like a short little program where they teach you about food and eating disorders and food safety and all that sort of stuff, in addition to whatever other classes might be tied into that.
Yeah, and it's like, I kind of want to discuss like what to do if you think you might have an eating disorder or you think a friend might. And really the big thing is just go to someone you trust and tell them. Because this isn't something to bear alone. This is,
Not at all.
or if just people care about you and they want to know what feels wrong about your life.
Yeah. Okay. I think people should also just remember that there's the independence of children. It's really important that you establish that, just not purely rely on education outside of home, but establish the education within your home too. You need that connection with your child or with your parents to have this, to be able to talk, to be like, hey, I'm going through this. I'm feeling this outside pressure. I don't want to fall to this before it's too late. So you have to have that connection with your parent. And the parents need to remember that the children are independent, so they need to be checking up on them as well. Because for like personal experience, whenever I was going through things and I had to be like, hey, I'm feeling this pressure to go do this and look this specific way, I am a very rare case where I have enough independence to not fall to that. But there are plenty of people, friends included, who did fall to this, and they need that connection with their parents.
Yeah, and if you feel like if your parents are the ones that are kind of putting this pressure on you, you don't need to tell them necessarily. You can tell a friend's parents, you can tell a teacher, you can tell your guidance counselor. You can just tell anyone that you know will be able to give you the resources you need to like face this.
Yeah. And to emphasize what Emerson was saying, to an extent, I believe that eating disorders are like all other mental health disorders. You can get help. There are ways that people can help you and assist you through eating disorders, and one, like what Emerson was saying, those are many options and ways to get help for eating disorders. But just leaning on your community or your friends or family, trusted adults, all that can really assist people.
Yeah. And we're bringing you this awareness because in the modern family, right, it's eating disorders can definitely be and are genetic. So like, for instance, if you have two children, they're twins, that 50% likely that one of the twins is going to get one or more of what the other one has if the second twin has an eating disorder. They're passed down through stress and through intergenerational trauma, and they're also passed down just through your parents having one and how the roles of a house or how the culture of that house is. They're more susceptible to have an eating disorder based off the economics of the home. If you'd like to touch on that in a minute, but the economics of the home, how much food is available, and just how they eat in general. Like what time you eat, especially can influence, like, let's say the child has a different schedule. They like stay up. Well, now they feel like they have to eat a lot so that they can still be full when they're done, which can easily lead down to a road of binge eating.
Well, yeah. So the finances in the home are a big cause of eating disorders. And like you were saying, Mason, people, especially teenagers and youth, can feel like kind of a cost burden to their parents when they consume. And that leads to a kind of stress factor like, oh, maybe I shouldn't eat. Maybe I shouldn't have lunch today because I don't want to spend my parents' credit card because I know they're struggling financially, and I don't want to add that level of burden to them.
Yeah. And I think part of the reason why eating disorders seem to be becoming so much more prevalent is because, like, life has gotten so much more stressful, especially in these last couple decades. It's like there is so much pressure, like, constantly. Like, I think partially kind of social media-ish. It's a very 24/7 landscape where it's like you need to be on top of everything all the time.
Can we break down some of the impacts of the eating disorders, like for suicide rates, which is a very big thing for the audience and people to recognize, is that this is not just harm to your physical body or to your mental state. It is very, like, realistic effects from just this harm. It's not just somebody going through something and somebody could be ending their life. Like 75% of transgender people that have eating disorders and have been reported to have them all have suicide. There's a suicide rate of 75% of this. It is a very big impact. People are very have huge feelings toward these, and if they don't get these help, then they high suicide rates.
Yeah, or I think that really stems from, well, it's very physically dangerous, which leads you to be, or when you restrict your eating, your way of thinking becomes much narrower.
Mm-hmm.
So it could lead you to be much more easily fall deeper into depression. But eating disorders themselves really stem from this intense anxiety and depression and low self-esteem, or they tend to, at least. So it really just it tends to be just a really big sign that this person might be a danger to themselves, or they are a danger to themselves. They're not letting themselves eat. So it's a really big thing where it's like you need, or if you think you have an eating disorder, you really need to talk to other people about this. They need to be able to know.
I think that's why they're...
You can finish your sentence and then we'll move on.
I was going to say, I think that's part of why people struggling with eating disorders, why food therapy and therapy could be such a big assistance in that level, because it often ties in, like what you were saying, it often ties in with other mental health conditions, such as like anxiety, depression, low self-esteem, self-hatred, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
A lot of food and eating disorders stem from those.
And with that, we're going to open for questions.
Yeah. Do you have any questions in the chat?
Any questions in the chat? Any questions in person, ma'am? Ma'ams?
We have one from the chat that asks, who do you talk to if you suspect your friend has an eating disorder?
Okay, full question. Who do you talk to if you suspect your friend has an eating disorder? I would say whoever you would trust if you thought you yourself had an eating disorder, or talk to your friend for sure. But if you suspect, or if they're resistant to getting help, I would say it's more important for them to get help.
I would say that's a very tricky question. That requires, you should never ask somebody else for opinions on another person. I think you should be asking them, find a way to steer a conversation into a light enough topic in a way that you can get an answer from them without triggering any thoughts or any unwanted pressures on them. Because the only way you can know about them is by asking them, not other people.
Yeah, and don't ask like outright, like, hey, do you have an eating disorder? Like, ask them what's going on in their life, and like if they feel like they've like lost control in any way.
Yeah, I would talk directly to the friend because I think it's kind of pointless to reach out to someone else on behalf of somebody
Yeah.
if you suspect they have an issue going on.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, it kind of just depends on the person, like their home situation, their friend situation. Like maybe it might be best to reach out to their parents if you've already talked to them and they agree with you, or maybe it's best to reach out to their friends. I mean, it's very subjective to their individuals.
Yeah,
life.
it's a very individual needs.
Another question?
I do. I have two questions. But the first one is, I mean, you guys touched on talking more about this in school. So if you guys had the opportunity to like redesign health and nutrition classes, or how do you see that, or how would you redesign it if you could make a difference in schools?
Who wants to speak first?
Okay, well, the question was how would we redesign health and nutrition classes?
I would implement a 2 to 3 week course, kind of like the financial aid, or not financial aid, the financial education courses that are already mandated in Oklahoma schools, and do one of those for eating disorders and just like the broader topic of just like how to eat right, what's a good amount of food to intake, like
Yeah.
all that sort of stuff.
And just a really like comprehensive understanding of what each thing does to you or does for you. Because it's like, I think a lot of people think that like sugar, any kind of sugar, is like so bad for you.
Yeah.
But it's like if you're getting a healthy amount, it's like it's really good for your brain to have that extra energy.
And along with the issue of like trans fat versus just normal fat, well, that happened 2 years ago and still hasn't really been like understood. I think would be a definite thing that non-influence to inform in that course, which is I would probably do a half credit semester course to go over multiple things, to go over like typical health science, typical diets, and then also what the average body is like. I would probably have them explain things like the BMI scale, things like how doctors describe you, things of the different studies of different races and their different weights, not races, but different cultures is what I meant to say. Different cultures, different rates, and how each thing is different, was normalized differently. That way they can understand not just the information, but what influences the information and what influences the views. But then you had a second question, ma'am?
I read something recently that said that teens talk more about anxiety and depression openly than they do eating disorders. So I was curious of your take on that as well.
From personal experiences, I would say pretty accurate actually. The culture of anxiety has become kind of humorous in the sense that like a lot of people just joke openly about it, but in a half serious way.
Yeah, it's kind of like or like everyone has a little bit of it kind of thing with anxiety and depression. But I think with eating disorders, it's like such a serious topic that it's really hard to bring up casually.
Yeah, it feels a little too much weight, which is why you need to bring more awareness and more acknowledgement of it, of just saying, hey, you can talk openly about this. Because anxiety and depression used to carry that same weight of like so much expectations upon being depressed. And the only way to really solve that is just to bring it up more.
Yeah. I think you kind of have to approach all kind of like mental health disorders with the same with the same amount of weight on it. So eating disorders are a very heavy topic that often go undiscussed, while anxiety and depression are a little bit more prevalently known, at least in modern society.
Yeah, and it's kind of used, it's almost, I'd say saying someone has an eating disorder is almost like an insult sometimes.
Yeah.
I've definitely seen that actually. I was like
schools for that.
Yeah. People at Edison especially, like there's some skinny people who are like, oh, you have an eating disorder. Like, no, maybe I just am this way. And it's used as an insult, which is strangely enough, the time that is most been aware is when it's used as an insult. And so you have to kind of move past that, because that was how anxiety was before. Oh, no, you're just anxious. Stop being anxious. And then you move past that. So it's just more acknowledgement and more awareness about it brings out the availability to talk about it.
Any more questions?
Do you think that there's anything to do with, and you kind of touched on this, where anxiety and depression aren't necessarily visual, but that, this is an open question. I don't know how I'm trying to put this out there, But like anxiety and depression aren't visual most of the time. Sometimes you can tell, but you can tell with. I forgot the mic. Sorry, but you can tell with eating disorders sometimes that's actually exist. But that doesn't seem to make sense in my head because if people are more open to talk about depression and anxiety, which isn't always with the naked eye, but eating disorders are, like, I'm trying to make that make sense because
I think I can explain that a bit, actually.
okay, that's
Yeah.
great. Thank you.
I was going to say there's shame culture is what it is. The reason people aren't as open and like don't show the true like realness of it is because there's a bit of shame culture. You're shamed for having it, or you're shamed for like knowing about it sometimes, especially because like, not to get like out of topic, but like the fear of being woke is also extends to just knowing medical knowledge at this point. You just knowing about it, you're shamed for it a little bit.
Yeah. Or I kind of think it's also like, or they're all serious things, but I think that because eating disorders is seen as this more serious thing, it's like the difference between like talking about your seasonal allergies or talking about your cancer or something. Because it's like it's like such a downer topic.
Yeah, and on top of that, for cancer especially, you're seen as a hero, right? You're upheld, you're put on a little pedestal. But like with an eating disorder, why are you not also proud of the person for going through with that and getting better at it? You're shamed for it.
Yeah. You're definitely held to a negative standard with an eating disorder, and it's when it's used as like kind of an accusation, it's a very harmful perspective because it can actually lead to eating disorders. If someone's called anorexic and they're not actually anorexic, then maybe they're like, okay, maybe I need to eat more, and then they start overeating, and then that's an eating disorder.
Yeah, or it's really just people are way too comfortable people comment on each other's bodies all the time, but it's like they don't want to think about that it's like maybe this is a sign of something.
Mm-hmm. Have we answered every question? Is there anything else anybody would like
Any
to...
questions in the chat?
Yeah. Chat, what's your question?
How can policymakers or community organizers better support prevention and recovery initiatives for youth? And then as a second part to that, for those of us that want to advocate, what are some small but meaningful actions we can take as community members and to make a difference?
So it's actually kind of an issue in the government with the lack of spending on research and treatment for eating disorders. Like that's something that I was researching from the, NEDA, National Eating Disorder Association. So only $55 million is spent by the U.S. government on research and eating disorders, which translates to $1.83 per person. Compare that to something like autism. The spending on research and treatment is $44 per person. So it's vastly underfunded compared to any other health condition. And then it's the same way with anxiety and depression. The level of amount that they're spending on research and funding is substantially lower than almost any other mental disorder. And I also think including education would be a good way for advocating for eating disorder.
Yeah, I think if like a professional in like eating disorder and helping eating disorders, if they came to schools more often.
Yeah, we don't get a lot of, because like we get the Navy coming in, but we don't get any doctors or anybody else to come in to give some advice or anything else. And many core classes don't really like check up with them, I would say, for information and everything. But like all of our sources have been the NIH, the NEDA, wow, or the
NEDA.
Yeah. But like, because those are the most funded, they have the most money. So it's strictly related to a few sources because they're not getting enough funding. So policymakers should give them more funding for more research.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
And
for that other
part two,
question,
yeah, what
the
can people be
subtle
doing?
ways you can advocate for eating disorders is I really think, like, if you hear someone make like a fat joke or something, just be like, "Hey, what's funny about that, man?" Or like, if if you notice that someone's like really comments on someone else's eating or something, it's like, hey, maybe don't do that.
Because it's a lot of societal pressure. So go through society, change that. Stop making certain comments or jokes. Help others stop making those comments and jokes, and explain to them why this is wrong, so that you can be raising awareness through people. Movement spread through people. So increasing a knowledge between peers who are going to respect you more and listen to you more than, say, people coming into school, which should still happen. It's very peer-to-peer movement, and that's how these things spread.
Yeah, and I think when it comes to things that are like kind of socially acceptable, but you're trying to make it less so, it's a bit hard to go against the grain in the moment, but you really need to like hold strong when it comes to like, don't give them a pity laugh or anything.
Agreed. Cassius?
Oh, so I was going to say that part of the reason why I believe they don't go into schools and do all this stuff that like maybe the Navy might do is because there's only so few organizations actually working towards progress in the eating disorder thing. Like, we can only list like a few sources because it's not a very well outreached topic like anxiety and depression. Like, for many other issues in the world, like hunger and poverty, there's several chapters. There's like thousands of organizations around the globe trying to solve the issues. For eating disorders, there's only like a handful.
Yeah, and even then, they're research institutes, not necessarily outreach and public engagement. And I think that's something that should be formed, is an organization for that gets funding and probably nonprofit through community involvement to help increase knowledge about it, beyond just research, but people actively engaging you, so that it's not just sitting there on the web, but in your head.
Yeah. Okay. That's all the time we have for today's discussion.
Thank you to All Souls for letting us use the room.
Yeah.
Thank you also.
Teen Talk is brought to you by Tri-City Collective and made possible by generous contribution from the Charles and Lynn Schusterman Family Philanthropies.
Thank you. Closing
Thank
this
you.
out today.